lytter til
En original
podcast fra Arrow. Velkommen til Innovators Club. Rigtig god fornøjelse med dagens episode.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Innovators Club. My name is Christian Carlsen, and today I have two special guests with me from Arctic Wolf. The first one being Christopher Fielder.
Yes, Fielder. Christopher Fielder. I'm the Field Chief Technology Officer and Editor-in-Chief for Arctic Wolf. I've been in cybersecurity for almost 25 years now, and my background is actually from the U.S. military, from the Central Intelligence Agency. I worked in the private sector where I was a penetration tester, incident responder, and threat hunter. I was also a cybersecurity instructor, and I've been with Arctic Wolf for 5 years now.
Very nice. The second guest is Petter Glenstrup.
Hello guys, my name is Petter Glenstrup. I'm the SE Director for the Nordics. My history, very fast. I actually started up in early 90s with downloading games onto floppy drives and using C++ to hack games. And since then I've moved into data centers and all the cool stuff in the IT stuff, and now I'm here, so I'm looking forward to this podcast.
Nice to have you, Christoph. And today we're going to talk a lot about cybersecurity, and I can already tell that between you guys we have some good war stories coming. So welcome to this podcast.
Thank you.
Christopher, I was told that you have some good stories, some war stories about this security issue that some of our dear partners and customers have.
Yeah, we could talk about, background history. We could also talk about some of the research we've done at Arctic Wolf, because we put a lot of time and effort and resources into researching the state of cybersecurity right now, but also, challenges that a lot of people are seeing on the front lines and things that people are experiencing, so that we could try to help solve some of those problems.
Yeah. So do you see any new things in the front line that people are experiencing that some don't really come to mind?
Right now, one of the main things that everyone's talking about is AI. Everyone's talking artificial intelligence, whether that's good or bad or both. AI seems to be the topic of discussion. And an interesting thing that we've actually found is there seems to be almost more concern for artificial intelligence right now than there perhaps should be. So let me kind of give you an example of what I mean by that. When we took a look at the last year's worth of incident response cases that we've been helping with, that we've been coming through and doing the response on, it really boiled down to 96% of them, 96%, can be attributed to either ransomware, an intrusion, or business email compromise. Those were the big three. Every time we went into an IR case, it seemed to be one of those three things. But when we asked, over 1,000 cybersecurity leaders, we're talking about VPs, chief information security officers, leaders in the industry, what are you most concerned about? Artificial intelligence was the number one answer. It wasn't ransomware, which it has been every year prior for the past 8+ years. It was artificial intelligence, which I understand being concerned about it, but that being your number one concern is a little concerning to me, right? Yep. Because it's like, okay, it should be on your radar. You should think about it, but don't get ahead of yourself and put the important things to the side because you're so anxious to kind of solve a problem that may not be a problem yet. If that makes sense. And the really concerning thing was, okay, ransomware was the number two most important thing that, leaders were worried about. But in last place was business email compromise and intrusions, the two other things that we're seeing most common. So it's like, okay, maybe we need to step back and reassess our priorities here and say, okay, what do we really need to be putting emphasis on and being worried about? So, I don't know about you, but if you're seeing ransomware as a major concern, I think most people are in BEC, and some people don't even know what BEC is. Are you familiar with that? I'm sure you are.
Yeah, business email compromise, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big concern we have right now because it's not just accessing email, but it's getting into the email and actually committing cybercrime once you get into the email. So for those of you that aren't as familiar with what BEC is, it's getting access into the business's email, somebody's account, and then saying, hey, maybe I get access into the CEO's account and then sending people emails and saying, hey, please transfer funds to another account, or, give me information about some employees in the company. And so they're stealing, or they're having finances taken out through that method. And that's very detrimental to a lot of companies that are out there. And again, to not be concerned about that is concerning, because that's a major problem.
Do you think our general marketing and stuff like that has something to do with it? Because I can definitely see the same things that you're talking about, but I just think it has something to do with what's sexy to talk about. And business email compromise, and that has been a topic since I was born.
Yeah.
I feel like, and it still is, and it's a major factor in still how we get hacked and how we get scammed and stuff like that. But it's just not fun or sexy to talk about, and then it gets maybe dumped down in the rankings.
I think that's exactly the problem. Artificial intelligence is, you say, it's a sexy thing to talk about. It's fun. It's exciting. Indulge me here for a moment, but I think the problem is that we're all excited for it, but it can be a problem. Don't get me wrong there, but I don't think it's at the level that a lot of people are assuming that it's already at yet. So I liken it to the idea of virtual reality, right?
Yeah.
Like when I was growing up in the 90s, everyone was talking virtual reality and hoping that it was going to come out. We had some toys that had VR, and I remember some games that had VR, but the VR was terrible, right? It just wasn't very good. And it took us 20 plus years to get to the point where now we're at the point where it's like, okay, this virtual reality is something that's usable and something that's actually kind of cool looking. I think we're at kind of that same place with artificial intelligence, where we're anticipating its capability. We're anticipating all the threats that can come from it, but we're not quite there yet. Like we're right at that point. We're at that precipice. We're at that ledge where it's going to be a problem, and it's sexy to talk about, and it's it's really cool to anticipate the things that it's going to do, but don't let those cool, fun, exciting things distract you from the true day-to-day. I hate to say boring, because it's not boring when you get ransomwared. It's not boring when you get hit with a BEC, but don't let that distract you from those things that you can be solving right now.
Yeah. And in general, I see AI in security more as a tool for the hacker, more than something they should worry about. So if you're worried about AI, that can be a tool, especially in the future, a hacker could use, but he's still going to use it just like he's going to use other kind of software or other kind of means in order to hack you. It's still going to be like some kind of scam or some kind of ransomware that you should be very concerned about, depending on which industry you're in, of course. Some could also be Spanish, stuff like that. But
absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, it's exactly as you're saying. It's the same motivation. It's the same purpose. They're just using a different method to get to that, right? Yep. And so if I can give anyone listening a recommendation here, when it does come to AI, whenever I do a talk, whenever I'm going out there and speaking, I always tell the audience, if there's one thing you do take away from this when it comes to artificial intelligence, it's this. Make sure that you have an acceptable use policy in your company for artificial intelligence. That is the main thing that you can do right now when it comes to AI. And, quick story here, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I was at a CISO conference, a conference for Chief Information Security Officers. And after I just gotten done speaking, somebody actually grabbed me to say, hey, can I tell you an incident that just happened to me? I said, sure. What's going on? And they said, okay, here's what happened, because I want your opinion. It was a couple of weeks ago, and it was a Friday afternoon. And I had one of the directors of our company that had to do some performance reviews that were due by Monday. But they didn't want to waste their entire weekend writing performance reviews.
I see where this is going.
Some people do. And so they said, okay, my child was just telling me about this cool new tool called ChatGPT that they use to do their homework, which if anyone is young that's listening, I don't recommend that you do that. But they said, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to load the template for the performance reviews in ChatGPT, And then I'm going to load all of my notes about my employees into ChatGPT and say, now please take this information and use it to fill out these templates for all of my employees. If you're listening and you don't understand the problem there, that is a major privacy violation. That is a major breach of security, because ChatGPT and these open large language models, they're not databases where you can delete the information once you put it out there. You've released that information to the wild. You might as well have just posted it on the internet, because anyone can now go into that large language model, ChatGPT, and ask for that information, all that private information about those employees, and pull it right out. Yeah. But here was the problem. That company did not have a policy of explaining to their employees how to use AI. They didn't have an acceptable use policy. So that director really couldn't be held liable. They couldn't be held as doing anything wrong, because they can go, I didn't know. You didn't tell me, right? Yeah. So I highly suggest take a look at your environment and say, okay, here's the easiest way to get ahead of this. Is there any reason that we should be using these tools? Is there a legitimate reason? And if there's not, consider just writing a policy that says you're not allowed to use it. That's just that easy. And if you're caught using it, you can be, written up or terminated, whatever you think is necessary. And if there is a reason to use it, then write an acceptable use policy that says you can only use it in these parameters, in these situations, and you can only put this data in it, and that is it. And so if there's anything else I'll say about AI, it's this. Make sure your company has a good policy on how to use it and when to use it or to ban it. And that's kind of where I would say you're done with AI at that point for now, other than just kind of monitoring to make sure it's not being used against you.
Makes sense. But just to clarify, you say people are really concerned about AI. Do you have any statistics or any info on how often AI is actually used in any compromise?
Yeah, that's a difficult one to really pin down, because what they're using it for is difficult for us to tell when they're using it. A good way that attackers using AI right now is for social engineering and phishing purposes, where it used to be the way that you could tell people how to identify phishing was to jump in and say, okay, if you get an email and it's spelled incorrectly throughout, or it just doesn't make sense, there's logical errors or punctuation, or it seems like it was translated, not written in the person's original language, it's probably phishing, right? Yep. Because it's probably coming from another country, one of these professional scammers, you get the idea. But now attackers can use ChatGPT, and we've actually tested this, where they can go in and say, okay, ChatGPT, write an email for me that would make an executive from, let's say, Arctic Wolf, click on a link that I provide. That's all you need to tell it to do. And ChatGPT can do the research online to find out who those executives are. It just searches LinkedIn. It just searches, documents online. And it will write an excellent story to try to convince you to click on a link with no grammatical errors, no spelling mistakes, no logic mistakes, and it's convincing. So attackers are using that to, be more efficient, be more effective in their phishing and social engineering. Yeah. And it's difficult for us to know, how many times they've done that, Okay. The other way they're really using it is, for trying to identify the best way to a target. There was a tool that was called Bloodhound. I still believe it's still being used to find, the fastest way to crown jewels. So they're just automating some of that process to find, to go through and search through a large amount of information very quick to find the best data in the environment, the fastest way to, the crown jewels. Again, they're just automating that through AI.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I've been told that the story about phishing, I was supposed to look for grammatical errors and stuff like that, but now it's actually the other way around, especially in Danish, because it's such a small language. So now if you get an email that you're unsure about, and it's perfect to the comma, perfect sentence, then you should be worried, because nobody can do that in Danish.
That's true.
So it's the other way around, actually.
That's true.
I actually also heard from Iceland, one of the strangest and hardest languages to learn, that they were like, business email compromise, that's not a thing up here, because if they do that to us, we will spot it immediately. Today, sorry, they're like hit all over the place, and they're like, oops, this is a new attack vector for them. So
that makes sense.
So language is no longer a problem in the world of cybercrime, I think.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate thing. I mean, it's just how it's being used. So we have to develop what we're calling a culture of security awareness, or letting your people know from the ground up, like, you are going to be attacked. You're under attack. Just be aware of it and trust your instincts. If something seems odd, seems unusual, report it. There's no harm in reporting it. Like, one of the aspects of creating a culture of security awareness is kind of putting a friendly face to the security team, right? It used to be the security team were the quiet, scary ones that nobody wanted to talk to. And I know because I've been doing this for 20 plus years and people didn't want to talk to me. But it's making it a little more friendly to where people will say, I will tell them, hey, I accidentally clicked on that, or I got this weird email that doesn't make sense. Can you check it out and tell me if it's accurate? So that's one of the ways we're going to be able to combat this, is just making people be more comfortable reporting things and second guessing things or trusting their instincts.
Yeah. So one thing is what people concerned about. When I look through a lot of different reports on what are the compromises when incident happens, it's often related to email, as you said, either known vulnerabilities that isn't managed or patched, or what you would call it, or misconfigurations. Mm-hmm. Is that in line with what you see at customers?
Absolutely. It almost feels like you set me up here, because we've done research in this exact area. And what we've actually found, let me take a look at my notes here because I want to make sure I get the numbers exact. But what we found is that, when you're talking about, let's just say ransomware, for example, 93% of ransomware cases can be traced back to one of two things, right? Either an exposed remote access capability, or a vulnerability, an exposure. And a majority of those, I believe it's around 60% of the time, it's remote access. So for those that aren't as familiar, what I mean by that is, think about, people that do IT. And I was one of them, so I can talk about this because I'm making fun of myself here. But people, just humans in general, we're inherently lazy, unfortunately. So if we have to fix something, we don't want to get up and go to the computer, and we don't want to fix it. So what do? We install tools that allow us to fix it remotely. Your TeamViewer, your Dameware, your AnyConnect. There's a list of so many of them. We install those so that we can just sit at our computer and fix somebody else's computer. Even servers have remote access cards that you install. iDRAC, ILO, there's a series of them where you plug them in, put a cable in it, and you can remotely access the whole server. Well, what's happening is those are just kind of out there in the open for anyone to connect to on the internet. And we're seeing a lot of unfortunate organizations that are even leaving the passwords default. Mm-hmm. Like the username is admin and the password is 12345. And then people are connecting and they get full access into that server. 60% of the time there's a ransomware case, it's because the ransomware attacker is using one of those remote tools. They're using your own tools against you, because if you can remotely connect, of course they can as well. So be very cautious with that. What I recommend with people is, yes, I understand wanting to use those tools, especially if you're a, geographically distributed company where, you're working in an office in Copenhagen and you have a problem in Zurich, right? You can't exactly jump in the car and immediately go fix that. You got to fix it very quickly. But put the same security effort into it. Good passwords, multi-factor authentication, requiring you be connected to the VPN. And the other flip side of that, if 60% of the time it's the remote access, the remaining, I believe it's 36%, somewhere in there, but is the vulnerabilities, as you mentioned, right? It's just unpatched vulnerabilities. And I understand, one of the hardest things to do as a security practitioner is to develop a good patching program, because you feel like you're just running this, never-ending fight, this never-ending race, because new vulnerabilities are going to come out. Things need to be patched. But that doesn't mean you have to give up. What we actually found was that 76% of exploits that were utilized used 1 of 10 common vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. So it's just 10 of the most common ones. When you think about it, it makes sense, because attackers don't want to have to develop exploits for 1,000 different vulnerabilities. They may exist, right? And they may use them, like the advanced persistent threats, the nation states. They may use those really kind of lesser known ones, the complicated ones. But most attackers are just going to go after the low-hanging fruit, meaning the easiest thing. So what we found was that 76% of the time, it's 1 of 10 that just keeps showing up. The attackers using this, and because they're using common tools like, Shodan or something else to look for these open vulnerabilities. Even more interesting is we found that 51% of the time, it cut down from 10 to 4. Yeah. 51% of the time, 1 of 4 of the most common vulnerabilities was used by attackers. So, I understand developing a patching program can be difficult, but if you just protect your environment from the top 10, top 20, you're going to stop 76% of attacks that are out there. So just, look around your environment and say, okay, the CIS top 10 or whatever it may be. Do we have these things in our environment? Can I patch them? Are they updated? And if they are, you've at least done that much.
Is that something you help your partners and customers with?
Yeah, we actually do. So we offer something called our managed risk service. So our managed risk service, it actually goes through and we can scan for vulnerabilities in the environment. Okay. And one thing that we don't do, we're very upfront about this, is we don't patch for you. But that's a strategic decision. We help you develop a patching program. We help to prioritize what should be patched and when it should be patched. But we work with you to make sure that you are the one that applies the patch. And the reason that we've chosen to do that is we've seen multiple instances where there have been faulty patches, or if there have been patches that have actually caused more vulnerabilities, right? So we want to make sure that you are okay with the patch. You've authorized it, you're good with it, you've applied it, but we will help you with everything up to that point, if that makes sense. So we really make the program a lot easier.
And also helps them prioritize. I guess that's some of the hardest part, is where should you actually use your time?
Absolutely. Anyone can run a scanner and get the results and have a list of everything that should be patched, right? Mm-hmm. That's pretty straightforward and pretty easy. The difficult part is going, all right, now how do I make sense of this list, this output? Like, where should I start? And that's where we begin the process of helping you, is saying, okay, here are the most critical ones that you should really do right now.
Okay. That is also where our partners come in. So we have a very big thing with our customers to say, you have to work, we have to work, and our partners have to work together in this triangle of making you a more secure over time, in this future, this journey together. And that is where we see a lot of consultancy track and product track from our partners. So who can do the patching? The customer can do it, or our partners can do it. And if we do all the preparation work that Christopher just talked about, so that's actually a lot of work we need to do to prepare the factual evidence, the whatever actions that is needed, we will prepare that so somebody can do it fast. And the whole point is actually doing it faster than you did before, and point you towards the right thing to do. Instead of patching the things that is making you 76% less secure, then let's focus on the 76% that will make you more secure. And that is the enormous amount of vulnerabilities that we go in and say, let's not go left, let's go right here. Yeah. And if the customer, I have this big project that takes all my IT time, the partner should raise their hand and say, hey, I actually have some cool consultants, or Arrow in this case, or whoever it is that is in this triangle. Let's work together here. But if we from Arctic Wolf and our customers and our partners can say, we are basing this out of facts. It's not like fluffy, salesy, PowerPoint feeling stuff. It's factual stuff that points you towards the right thing to do right now. Yeah. And then you do that 5-10 minutes of admin time because we prepared it. And then you can move on to whatever you want to do next week. Yeah. But do this first. I thought we needed to look at this product. No, look at this service, or look at this. So if we see everything, we can also do this. Yeah. So this is super important for us. So the managed risk service that Christopher talked about, awesome, but we have to have holistic visibility into our customers. Yeah. That is one of the keys to finding all of these vulnerabilities, to sit and say, we can see it, we can plan it.
Yeah.
So the fact I talked about is all about that. So getting that full visibility is super, super important for our customers to make them more secure. That is how we see it.
Because I would imagine that the full visibility give you the visibility into an actual attack path for the hacker, meaning you could see, okay, well, you have, let's say, 2 different vulnerabilities. They are both critical, but if you manage to patch one of them, you should be pretty safe. And then you can also patch the other one when you get time, but you should prioritize this instead.
Yeah, exactly. That is super complex. The vulnerabilities are super noisy, if you can use that word. Yeah. But the complexity of this world of cybercrime, now Christopher put numbers behind it, but it's a lot. And if I'm sitting in a small Nordic, Danish company, Icelandic company, and I have 2 IT guys that are doing printing and servers and storage and whatever they do, somebody needs to be able to support and help them. That is where we come in and say, hey, instead of you thinking that this will take hours and weeks, no, it will take you 5-10 minutes. Yeah. Oh, I don't know how to hit up PowerShell. I don't know what Microsoft features I need to use or whatever. Well, a partner should jump in here and say, I actually know what they're talking about in that product we're talking about, or that service, or whatever the holistic visibility will give us insight to. So this is one of our keys, that we all 3 parties need to work together in the most effective, valuable, outcome-based way, because time and money is super important. And wasting time and money is not something our customers want to do. They simply do not want to take that risk anymore. They want to take everything and take the choice of making this plan together. So this is one of our keys to helping against the business even compromised. Whatever the cool stories of AI, and I support you, Christopher, 100% about the policy. I never forget when our CISO, Adam, he was like, nobody can use ChatGPT in Arctic Wolf. It's simply not, and that was a cool policy. Yeah. It was like 0%. There was no, I want to build a, no, 0% means 0%. And we had a clear policy about it. And then we went in and opened up a little bit, and
then
now
we
have
started using Gronk or something like that.
It was very clear what we could and could not do. It was super, super important.
That's a good way to approach it too. The approach of start by saying cannot be used, while we sort out the business use cases. Correct. And then you can begin to build out some of those and say, okay, now you can use it in these limited use cases, which is the approach that we took, which Peter said. So absolutely. And I completely back up what Peter said there. Like, attackers have been taking advantage for years now of the fact that IT teams, and if you're lucky enough to have a security team, are incredibly overworked and busy. And they can't do everything all at once. You know, I always tell people that one of the major problems right now is that companies say, I want to hire a security person. And they say, I want to hire a security person that has 10 years of experience in endpoint management and patch management and incident response and penetration testing and malware, assessment and everything else. And I want them to be able to work 72 hours a week. And I want them to do it all for, $60,000 a year US. It's like, okay, no, you're not going to find that person. You're not going to get that. So you're probably just going to leave that job vacant, which means nobody's going to be doing the job for you. An attacker is going to take advantage of that. But that's why we exist, and that's why we have these, really strong partnerships, so that we can say we can do X, Y, and Z. We can do the scanning. We can get the full visibility for you. We can help you develop that plan. And then if you still go, I still don't have the people to do that last mile. Well, guess what? We have these incredibly strong partners that can then come in and do that last mile as well, and make sure that there's really no excuse for an organization to not be secure anymore. You just have to find the right service and the right partners to help you out with what you need.
And I would imagine you have a lot of threat intel also to help you guide the customer in what he needs to prioritize in this case, because you talked about you need full visibility into the customer. That makes sense for me, because then you know where to start focus. But again, you should also have the threat intel of the hacker. what are they using, what tools, what vulnerabilities are they actually running some kind of scripts on, and et cetera. And you have a lot of that, I would guess.
We do. We actually have multiple teams inside of the company that make up what we call our Arctic Wolf Labs. Yeah. And that's what we call our TO right now, or our Threat Intelligence Operations. We also have our Threat Intelligence Research. They all work together to produce our own threat intelligence. Yeah. We use that in combination with third-party and open-source threat intelligence because we're going to use everything that we can find to try to identify those attacks. But with our customer base, you have to think we have a huge customer base that we are incredibly proud of, but that also gives us a huge data lake, a huge sample to work from to identify threats. And so if we see a threat in one customer's environment, not only do we investigate it and respond to it, but our threat intelligence operations runs a consecutive or an investigation at the same time. And they start to extract what we call IOCs, indicators of compromise, and signatures and behaviors. And we take that information and we apply that over the entire rest of the customer base to see if we find anything similar. Mm-hmm. So it's like if one person gets attacked, that's unfortunate. But the good news is that inoculates everybody else from that same attack because now we can look for that same thing. So we are really proud of that. We also have acquired something called VX Intel. And VX Intel produces 300 to 500,000 new malware samples per day. That is a huge amount of malware that we're finding. So 300 to 500,000 malware samples we're finding per day that we're then turning around and looking for in all the customer environments. And I wasn't even aware there was that much malware out there, but I guess it makes sense because now you have a new generation of polymorphic malware, which is malware that constantly changes. And touching back to AI, you have AI-empowered malware that's constantly rewriting itself and trying to be evasive. So we have to stay on top of it. That's why we acquired that. But all this empowers our threat intelligence. So, and then we're doing constant hunts through the data as well, saying, can we find anything that's happened to slip through? And if we have, we're going to make sure it doesn't slip through again. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and just for the listener, because I'm standing here thinking, and I have these conversations with a lot of different guys that just tell me, well, I have a scanner. I scan my external interfaces and try to patch the highest CVS vulnerability. Well, that's good. That's one approach. But if you don't know what's going on in the hacking environment that you have all this threat intel to, then you might patch, let's say, CVS 8. But all the hackers right now are actually using a lesser critical, what would you call it, exploit in their attack. So you should prioritize that. And if you don't have that threat intel and someone to help you with, then you are using your time inefficiently.
Absolutely. And what about, if you say, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm patching the level 10 and level 9 CSSVs, right, and CVEs, the most critical vulnerabilities, and I feel like I'm secure because I'm patching those. Well, what about the attackers that don't use a vulnerability? Mm-hmm. What about the attackers that have socially engineered a password? They've taken, or even just bought one. Like for those of you that aren't as familiar, there's something called credential brokers on the dark web, which is people that will just sell you a username and password that they've gotten access to. And you come in, an attacker comes in through just the normal VPN, and they get access in. And we're seeing a high rate of what we call living off the land techniques, which is attackers that aren't using those malicious tools. They're not using vulnerabilities. How do you detect that? And the only way to detect that is to start to look for suspicious and malicious behaviors, creating indicators of compromise. Because an attacker living off the land means they don't use a bad tool. They don't use PowerShell Empire. They don't use Cobalt Strike. They're using CMD. They're using Command Prompt. They're using PowerShell. They're using Bash, right? That's all they're using. So we start to say, okay, well, I can't just look for somebody running cmd.exe because I'm going to get all false positives. But what I can look for is somebody that's come in through the VPN from Russia, and they've come in at midnight, and they've immediately opened up cmd.exe and start doing pings of different systems throughout the environment. Yeah. And then they immediately do an xcopy and push that to Dropbox, right? So I tie those behaviors together and go, if you see that, That's what you hit on, and that's where we come in and lock it down, prevent anything from going out, and alert the customer.
Very cool story.
It happens more often than you'd like, unfortunately.
No, it makes really good sense. And the tools that you're describing there, I mean, some of it could just be misconfiguration or configuration that a company hasn't really thought about, that why should I be able to have excessive credentials or rights or something to things, and the hacker will abuse those things if you haven't thought of it.
Attackers love abusing, misconfigurations, or I always tell people this too. If it makes life easier for you, it's making life easier for the attacker.
Yeah.
Right? I've seen multiple environments where they do give people, they're like, if, I've got these salespeople that travel around and they have their own laptops, so I make them admins or administrators on their own laptops so they can change stuff. No, don't do that. Don't make everybody an admin because you're going to do nothing but ask for problems. You should be restricting a lot of those accounts. And yeah, that's the main thing. We don't want to make life harder for you, but we do want to make life harder for the attackers. And unfortunately, that means that sometimes it is going to be a little more difficult for you. But that's how you ensure security. It's like multi-factor authentication. There is not a good excuse for organizations to not be using MFA today.
Thank you, everybody who listened to this episode of Innovators Club. Here in the end, do you have any last thoughts, Christopher?
Sure. I'll actually take the opportunity to say that, as I mentioned before, Arctic Wolf, we put a lot of time and effort into the research we do to kind of help feed back into the security community. So be on the lookout. In April of 2025, we have our yearly cybersecurity trends report coming out. So you can find that for free on our website. Go check that out because we have a lot of great data that you're going to see in there, and any of our other reports you can find on there as well. And again, they're all free, and please feel free to use them because they have a lot of great, important data.
Husk, du kan finde links og mere materiale i podcastens episodebeskrivelse. Tak fordi du lyttede med. Ha' en skøn dag. Har du ønsker til en podcast, vi endnu ikke har lavet? Så send os en besked.